John 2:17. Recordati vero sunt discipuli eius, quia scriptum est zelus domus tuae comedit me. But his disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house has consumed me, or is consuming me. Recordati may look unfamiliar to you, and that could be because it's a deponent verb. Recordor, recordari. Recordati sunt, we've got to take these together because this is a compound verb form, expresses the third person plural, perfect, passive, indicative as to form, but because this is a deponent verb, it's actually an active sense. I say with my students, forma passiva sensus activus. That is passive form, but active meaning. Why? Because that's what deponency is. So the disciples, not just the disciples, but his disciples, that is Christ's disciples, remembered. What did they remember? Well, what they remembered is given in this clause here, that it was written. And often in the Vulgate, instead of quia in this connection, you might see quod. And this is a characteristic late antique / medieval usage of these words, substituting effectively for what we might have expected in classical Latin, which is the accusative plus infinitive. Here we're going to do something a little bit simpler. They remembered that it was written. Here's another compound verb form, third person singular, perfect, passive, a true passive in this case, indicative. It was written, namely in the scriptures. And then here we get a quotation from what in English Bibles is Psalm 69. Zeal, zelus, domus, and note well, this is a long U because it's a genitive singular of a noun from the fourth declension. Zeal for your house consumes or has consumed me. We'll get to comedit in a minute, but first let's talk about what kind of genitive domus tuae is. Well, it's what we call an objective genitive, and we can oppose this to the other kind, which is a subjective genitive. A subjective genitive is the type that we think of all the time expressing possession or belonging in a straightforward way. An objective genitive, though, is a genitive that we normally translate in English with the word for instead of what we would do generally for a subjective genitive, which is of. The roof of the house, for example, versus love for the house, which would be an objective genitive. So this is frequently a kind of use of the genitive that we find with words of emotion, as in the case of zelus, love, fear, zeal. All of these emotion words frequently show up with an objective genitive because they express the target or object of that emotion. Zelus domus tuae, zeal for your house, does consume me in the present tense, or it could also be has consumed me. And I put this macron in brackets because the pronunciation will change a little bit based on whether this is present or perfect. It's grammatically ambiguous from the form, but I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a perfect third person singular, perfect active indicative. And my reason for saying that is in the text from which this quotation is drawn, Psalm 69, we have the perfect tense. Zeal for your house has consumed me in the past tense. So in Latin, comedit, has consumed me. However, in the Greek text, we actually have an indication of the future here, will consume me. So something has happened here in our Vulgate version. Probably there's a reflexive remembrance of the original text being quoted from the Vulgate version of Psalm 69, and that explains our use of the perfect at comedit. You could also say that it's present, but I think that case is maybe just a touch harder to make.